This is what we're making, a double bezel for a double-sided stone. We're going to make a bezel setting for a double cabochon. So what I'm going to do is take two 18 by 25 cabs, and I'm just going to put a dab of 5-minute epoxy between them to hold them together. Now you can do the width plus the length divided by 2 plus 0.5 for our fine silver bezel times 3.14, and it'll give us the length for this. And to figure the height, normally the height is 1/3 the height of the stone. So this is a total of almost 12, which would be 4 millimeters. And if you look, 4 millimeters isn't enough. So what you do is you just open your calipers until it looks like the right amount for the bezel, because we want enough to come over so it holds the stones quite easily. Yeah. So I'm going to use 6.5 for mine, 6.5 millimeters high. Oh yeah, one of my heroes. So you can just set your calipers, hook the edge over the metal, drag the back down, and it will give you a nice line to cut to. And I'm going to use a shear to cut this. After you've done your measuring and calculating, cut your bezel to length and to height. File the ends flat. Make sure they're filed flat. Anneal it. Wrap it around your stone to make sure it's the correct fit before you solder. So if your metal is annealed, it'll be dead soft and quite easy to work. So I'm just going to wrap this around, and what I want is I want the seam to be on a long side so that it's easy to work. If it's on the end, it's quite difficult to work. So this is just to check to make sure it's the right length. And my measurement was incorrect. This is about 4 millimeters too short. So what we can do is we can just pass this through the rolling mill with just a slight amount of pressure, and it'll give us the length we need. So I knead it again if you've worked it. And now I've only decreased this by 0.2 of a millimeter, and you'll be able to see that it's increased in length by a dramatic amount. So you can see that there's that much overlap now. So I'll just mark it, cut it, make sure the ends are flat, and solder it, hard solder. Now what I do with my bezels is I just do the old over and under trick so that when they're touching, they have enough pressure to hold them together. Then I just hold this joint up in a third hand, and I put my solder on the outside. A neutral flame, and I've got a piece of hard solder on my solder pick. So I'll just bring this up to temperature. The flux will go clear, and at that point I place my solder, and it flows almost immediately. So quench it, pickle it, and check it for fit on your stone. So what we want is a snug fit so the stone stays in there, but we don't want it tight. And at this point, what I do is I just use my sanding stick and tidy up this before the bezel is pushed over so that I don't get anywhere near the stone with my sandpaper. You could put this on a wooden dowel, or you could just hold it in your fingers. But by being on the stone, it has the right curve, and it's quite easy to tidy it up with your sanding stick. Just make sure you don't hit the stone. Yeah. So we want this nice and pretty. And then we're going to solder on our jump ring or bail wherever we want it before we set the stone. So tidy up your join, and then we'll, for this one I think I'll just solder a small jump ring on so that I can have an articulated bail. So tidy up the edges. There's usually a little bit of a bump where the join is, and I just hold this with my fingers and rub it. I'm using 400 grade paper on my bench. Both sides have to be pretty. So make sure your join is nice and tidy, no excess solder, and don't thin the edges. So just take the solder off, don't thin the bezel, otherwise it'll be obvious when you go to push the edge over. Make your bail or your jump ring, and whichever you decide to use, make sure that you have a decent sized flat filed on it so that you have a really good solder join. Because there's nothing more depressing than going to push your bezel over and have what you're going to hang it on fall off. So we don't want to do that. Make sure you have a good meniscus when you solder, so that you can see that there's a connection between the two. Before I align my piece to solder on there, I put a little texture mark on, because once you're down like this, it's really difficult to see what's the center. You can see I'm just resting my bezel on top of my third hand. It's not held anywhere, it's just sitting on there, and my little jump ring is sitting on my charcoal block. So I'll flux that and solder it. So have a look, and this is what I mean by the meniscus, this curve between the two. So look at both sides, make sure it's nice and pretty. If it's slightly off as far as the angle, that's okay, we can just bend that straight. So now we'll pickle it, and we're ready to set the stone. So I'll be using thermolock to hold the piece, and what this is, it's a thermal plastic, where when you heat the plastic up either in hot water or a microwave, it becomes very pliable and hot. And when it cools off, it's as hard as, it's like solid plastic. So you can see where I held a shell in this piece. So what I won't be doing is showing you heating up this, and I will show you putting the piece in, but I'll get this pliable and then I'll start the movie again. So this material is made by GRS, the same people that make the nice little vices and ring holders and all that, and it comes like this, and it usually comes in a large quantity. Otto Frey is one place that sells it, and it comes in half a kilo, and this is plastic, so it's super light. So quite a few of you should get together and do an order for this if you want to use it, because a couple of these pieces would last you. It's reusable. So you just heat it in a microwave on a piece of Teflon, otherwise it'll stick to your turntable. 20 seconds at a time. And when it's nice and pliable, then that's what we want.